A police officer vanished on a frozen mountain pass. Her cruiser burned. Her K9 lay broken beside the wreck. The people who ordered it believed the storm would erase everything. No witnesses, no survivors. But high above the road, in a remote cabin hidden by snow and silence, a former Navy SEAL saw the firelight cut through the dark. One decision would expose a truth powerful men were desperate to bury. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, subscribe for more stories of courage, loyalty, and second chances. Winter had swallowed Snow Pine Ridge, Montana, whole and unmerciful. The mountain town, usually quiet even in better seasons, had retreated entirely beneath sheets of snow and howling wind. Street lights along the single main road flickered like tired sentinels before vanishing into white nothingness. Above the town, the mountain pass curved like a scar through the forest, dangerous even in daylight, lethal under a blizzard such as this. Miles away from town, buried deep among frost-heavy pines, stood a solitary wooden cabin. Inside it lived Ethan Vale. At 29, Ethan carried the kind of beauty that went unnoticed at first glance and lingered afterward. Tall, broad-shouldered, built lean and strong rather than bulky. His dark hair was cut short and practical, the kind favored by men who disliked mirrors. His face was sharply defined, clean-shaven, with calm gray-blue eyes that seemed always alert, always measuring distance and threat, even when nothing appeared to be there. The stillness around him was not peaceful. It was disciplined, controlled. A year ago he had walked away from the Navy SEALs. No ceremony, no speeches, just silence, paperwork, and a duffel bag left at the foot of his bed. Now he lived alone. The cabin was sparse but orderly, firewood stacked precisely by the hearth, boots aligned near the door, a rifle cleaned and secured, not displayed. Ethan sat at a small wooden table, repairing a cracked radio casing with slow, methodical movements. Outside, the storm battered the cabin walls as if testing them, shrieking through the trees like something wounded and angry. He did not flinch. Then it happened. A deep, concussive sound tore through the wind, metal screaming against metal, followed by a brief, violent orange glow that lit the snow-packed sky beyond the trees. Ethan's hands froze. That sound did not belong to the mountain. He was on his feet instantly, jacket pulled on in one smooth motion, boots laced without haste. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside, the cold biting hard enough to steal his breath. Snow slashed sideways, blinding and relentless, but Ethan leaned into it, orienting himself by instinct alone. The glow came again, flickering, unstable. Fire. He moved faster. The descent toward the mountain road was treacherous, the path nearly erased by snowdrifts. When he reached the final bend, the scene below snapped into focus in the beam of his flashlight. A police cruiser lay upside down against the guardrail. The engine compartment was aflame, fire licking hungrily along twisted metal. Thick smoke mixed with gasoline fumes, sharp enough to burn the back of his throat. The police insignia on the door was half melted, barely visible beneath ash and ice. Ethan scanned once, quickly, efficiently. Inside the wreck, a woman hung limp against her seatbelt. She wore a dark winter police uniform, heavy-duty fabric reinforced at the shoulders and elbows. Her hair, dark auburn, shoulder length, was matted with snow and blood where her head had struck the frame. Her face, pale and drawn, still held traces of resolve even in unconsciousness. A name patch on her chest read, "Rowan Hale." Her chest rose faintly. Alive. Ethan moved without hesitation. He smashed the side window, cleared the glass, and reached inside. 2 fingers found her pulse. Weak, but steady. He unbuckled the harness and lifted her free, bracing her weight against his body with practiced ease. She was lighter than she looked, but rigid with shock and cold. He carried her several yards upwind and laid her gently in the snow, shielding her from the worst of the gale. Then he heard it, a sound low and broken, a dog's breath. Ethan turned back toward the wreck. Partially pinned beneath the collapsed rear frame lay a German shepherd, large and powerfully built, his sable and black coat soaked dark along the flank. His body was unnaturally still, chest barely moving. One ear was torn, the other pressed flat against his skull. A thick service collar circled his neck, scorched but intact. This was no pet. This was a K9. Ethan dropped to one knee, ignoring the growing flames. His hand slid beneath the dog's rib cage, feeling for movement, for life. The dog's breathing was shallow, irregular. But there. "Easy," Ethan murmured, voice low and steady, the same tone he once used in places where panic meant death. He gathered the dog into his arms just as the engine detonated. The explosion thundered through the pass, heat roaring at his back as he turned and ran. Shrapnel tore into the snow where he had been seconds earlier. Ethan did not look back until he reached the slope above the road, lungs burning, arms locked tight around the wounded shepherd. Behind him, the cruiser was nothing but flame and smoke. Only then did Ethan slow. He laid the dog beside Rowan, his jacket wrapped around both of them. The shepherd's tag glinted briefly in the firelight, but Ethan didn't read it yet. His focus remained fixed on keeping them breathing, keeping them alive. Far below, beyond the storm, Snow Pine Ridge slept on, unaware that something had gone terribly wrong on its mountain road. Earlier that night, Officer Rowan Hale had felt it, the unease. She was 32, known around Snow Pine as reliable and quietly relentless, not loud, not reckless, but thorough in a way that made people nervous when they had something to hide. Her posture was upright even behind the wheel, eyes sharp beneath the brim of her winter patrol cap. The folder on the passenger seat was thin, unassuming. That was what made it dangerous. For miles she had sensed headlights behind her, too steady, too patient. When she slowed, they slowed. When she accelerated, they followed. The mountain road twisted, narrowed, climbed. Her radio crackled with static. Rowan tightened her grip on the wheel. Then the impact came. In the warmth of Snow Pine City Hall, far from the blizzard's teeth, Mayor Miles Keaton stood by a tall window, hands clasped behind his back. In his mid-40s, Keaton was tall and immaculately composed, his silver-threaded dark hair always perfectly in place. His suits were expensive without being flashy, his smile measured, practiced, the smile of a man trusted by everyone and truly known by no one. A phone buzzed on his desk. He answered calmly. "Yes?" A pause. His expression did not change. "I see," he said. "The accident happened then." Another pause. Keaton turned slightly, gazing out at the falling snow as if it were nothing more than a mild inconvenience. "No bodies?" he asked softly. The line went quiet. Keaton ended the call and exhaled slowly, thoughtfully. Outside, the storm raged on, and somewhere on the mountain, a woman who should have been dead still breathed. The cabin sat hunched beneath the weight of snow, its roof groaning softly as the storm pressed down. Inside, firelight breathed life into the single room, casting long shadows across rough-hewn walls. The scent of pine resin and smoke mixed with antiseptic and cold metal. Ethan Vale worked with quiet precision. He laid Rowan Hale on a thick wool blanket near the hearth, positioning her body carefully, mindful of her neck and spine. His movements were deliberate, economical. No wasted motion, no hesitation. He peeled back her frozen jacket, checked for fractures, then pressed 2 fingers to her throat again. Her pulse fluttered, thin but stubborn. "Stay with me," he murmured, though her eyes remained closed. Beside her, the German shepherd lay stretched out on his side. The dog was massive even in stillness. Broad chest, powerful legs built for endurance rather than speed. His sable coat was matted with blood along the flank, the fur stiffening as it froze. Ethan cut the fabric of the dog's harness away with a small blade, exposing the wound. The breathing was shallow, uneven. Ethan stoked the fire higher, then dragged a second blanket over, wrapping both woman and dog. He pressed his jacket around the shepherd's torso, using his own body heat where the fire could not reach. Minutes passed. The storm howled, wood cracked in the flames. Then the dog stirred. A low, broken sound rose from his chest. Not a growl, not a whine, but something in between. His head lifted an inch before dropping again. One eye opened, dark and glassy, searching. Ethan froze, then slowly raised both hands, palms open. "It's all right," he said softly. "Easy." The shepherd gathered what little strength he had and pushed himself halfway up, muscles trembling violently. His gaze snapped to Rowan. With a sudden surge of instinct, he dragged himself forward, positioning his body between her and Ethan, teeth bared in a weak but unmistakable warning. The name on his collar caught the firelight. Asher. "Guardian?" Ethan whispered, more observation than comment. Asher's legs buckled, but he refused to move away. His breathing hitched, pain rippling through his frame, yet his focus never left the woman behind him. Ethan eased back a step, respect in his posture. "I'm not taking her," he said quietly. "You did your job." Asher's head lowered slightly, though his body remained angled protectively. After a few seconds that felt like minutes, his strength failed him. He collapsed beside Rowan, flank heaving, muzzle resting inches from her hand. Only then did Ethan move again. Rowan gasped. Her eyes flew open, wild and unfocused. She sucked in air as if surfacing from deep water, hands clawing at the blanket. "Hey," Ethan said calmly, kneeling into her line of sight. "You're safe. Don't move." She tried anyway, panic flooding her face. Her gaze locked onto the unfamiliar man, then snapped to Asher lying wounded beside her. "No, Asher." Her voice cracked. "He's alive," Ethan said quickly. "He stayed with you." Her breathing slowed, just a fraction. Tears welled, but didn't fall. Rowan Hale was built lean and athletic, her features sharp rather than soft, the kind of face shaped by long nights and responsibility. Even injured, there was steel in her expression. She swallowed hard. The road, the truck. Ethan waited. "It wasn't an accident," she said, each word costing effort. "I knew it. I felt them behind me for miles. Headlights that wouldn't fall back, wouldn't pass." Her hand trembled as she clenched it into the blanket. "They hit me, from behind, a big truck, black grill, no plates." Ethan's jaw tightened, the calm in his eyes shifting into something colder. "On purpose," she whispered. "They wanted me off that road." "Why?" he asked. Rowan closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again, resolve burning through the pain. "I was carrying files, not backup copies. Originals?" The fire popped sharply. Ethan leaned back on his heels, the weight of the words settling in. This wasn't a random crash, it was a message that failed. Asher stirred again, lifting his head just enough to nudge Rowan's fingers. She curled them into his fur instinctively, grounding herself in the familiar warmth. "They'll think I'm dead," she said. "For now." Ethan stood and crossed to the small window, peering out into the white chaos. Snow swallowed everything beyond a few feet. "Then we keep it that way," he replied. Miles Keaton watched the footage twice. The security room beneath Snow Pine City Hall was dim, illuminated only by monitors and the pale glow of falling snow caught on camera lenses. Keaton stood straight-backed, hands clasped loosely behind him, his tailored coat pristine despite the weather outside. His face remained composed, but his eyes missed nothing. The camera on Snow Pine Pass was old, partially obscured by ice. The crash itself was little more than a violent blur of light and shadow. But the minutes after, that was where Keaton's attention lingered. A figure moved through the storm. Tall, controlled, purposeful. The man bent, lifted the officer with practiced care, then returned to the wreck without hesitation. No panic, no wasted motion. Keaton leaned closer. "Pause it," he said. The technician obeyed. The image froze, grainy, distorted, but telling. "That," Keaton said quietly, "is not a civilian." The technician, a young man with tired eyes and a badge he hadn't yet grown into, swallowed. "Sir, the face—" "I don't need the face," Keaton replied. "I need the pattern." He straightened, turning away from the screen. "Run property records," he continued. "Every occupied structure within 10 miles of that stretch, cabins, sheds, anything with heat?" "Yes, sir." Keaton's reflection flickered in the dark glass of the monitors. His calm was unsettling, measured like a man who had already accepted the cost of what came next. "There's a third variable now," he murmured to himself, "and I don't like surprises." Outside, snow piled higher against the city hall steps, sealing the town into silence. Back in the cabin, Rowan drifted in and out of shallow sleep, pain pulling at her consciousness. Ethan remained awake, seated between her and the door, eyes tracking the fire and the shadows beyond the walls. Asher's breathing steadied, each rise and fall a fragile victory. The storm showed no sign of mercy. Neither would the people who had tried to bury the truth beneath it. The wind tightened its grip on the mountain as night deepened. Snow struck the cabin walls with renewed force, a relentless hiss that seeped into the bones. Inside, the fire burned steady, but low, its warmth no match for what pressed against the door. Rowan Hale lay propped against folded blankets, her color improved, but her movements careful, measured. Pain still threaded through her ribs, yet her eyes were clear now, sharp, assessing. She was a woman shaped by duty, lean, strong, with a composure that did not crack easily. The shock had passed. What remained was resolve. Ethan Vale listened without interrupting. She spoke quietly at first, then steadier as the words took shape. The investigation had begun months earlier with anomalies. Cargo logs that didn't line up, patrol schedules quietly altered, trucks rerouted at the last minute along the mountain pass. Snowpine Ridge was a perfect corridor. Weather discouraged scrutiny. Isolation bred complacency. Drugs moved through under the cover of winter. Weapons followed. And it wasn't just smugglers, Rowan said. Permits, escorts, clearances, someone high enough to make it all look official. Ethan's gaze remained fixed on the flames, his posture relaxed but alert, the stillness of a man cataloging threats. He didn't need names to understand the shape of corruption. He'd seen it before. Systems bent from the inside, truth buried under procedure. Rowan's jaw tightened. When I pulled transaction records and cross-checked the routes, they pointed back here, the pass, the town, city signatures where they shouldn't be. She exhaled. I couldn't trust the station. I couldn't trust anyone. Ethan nodded once. The fire snapped. She shifted slightly, wincing, and reached toward the collar of her uniform. The fabric there was torn, the stitching rough. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He moved closer, careful, respectful. "Let me," he said. With a small blade, he traced the seam where the thread was thicker than necessary. The stitches gave way to reveal a narrow cavity sewn into the lining. Inside sat a compact USB drive, scuffed but intact. Rowan's breath caught. I hid it before the drive up the pass. If I went down, it wouldn't be obvious. Ethan held the drive between his fingers, weighing it. Enough to burn them. Enough to put people away, she said, if it survives. Outside, the storm surged, wind hammering the cabin as if angered by the truth now spoken aloud. The lights flickered, then went out. The hum of electricity died, leaving only firelight and the roar beyond the walls. Ethan rose immediately. He crossed to the breaker, checked the small generator by the door. It had been cut clean. No overload, no failure. Intentional. Rowan's eyes followed him. That wasn't the storm. No, Ethan replied. It wasn't. He returned to the center of the room, the USB tucked securely into his jacket. The mountain felt closer, now pressing inward. If they know you're alive, they'll come. Rowan didn't argue. She glanced toward Asher. The German shepherd lay near the hearth, breathing steadier now. His frame was powerful even in rest, a working dog built for endurance and obedience. One eye opened as Ethan approached. The dog's gaze was calm but vigilant, as if he understood the stakes without words. They'll come, Rowan said again, softer. And they won't knock. Ethan looked to the door, then the windows, measuring distances, angles. Then we prepare. Miles Keaton stood over a map spread across a polished desk, the contours of Snow Pine Ridge marked in thin red lines. The office around him was warm, tasteful. Dark wood, framed commendations, a view of the town square buried in white. Keaton himself was immaculate as ever, tall and composed, his presence reassuring to those who needed to believe in order. A man stood across from him, shoulders hunched against the heat. Caleb Rourke was in his late 50s, a county clerk by title, a gatekeeper by habit. Thin hair combed back, eyes sharp and calculating, he had the look of someone who survived by knowing which doors opened quietly. There's only one structure that fits, Rourke said, tapping the map. Power draw, occupancy, distance from the pass. A cabin registered to an Ethan Vale. Keaton didn't react outwardly. Background? Sparse, Rourke replied. Too sparse. Property paid in full. No local employment. But there's a service flag buried deep. Special operations. Navy. Discharged a year ago. Keaton's mouth tightened just slightly. SEAL. Rourke nodded. That's what my contact says. Keaton straightened, hands folding neatly. The pieces aligned. The figure on the camera. The blackout. The missing bodies. If he pulled her out, Keaton said, voice low, he's capable, and if he's capable, he's a problem. Rourke hesitated. You want him brought in? Keaton's eyes drifted to the window, to the snowfall erasing tracks as fast as they could be made. Not yet. I want eyes. Quiet ones. He turned back. She hasn't appeared at any hospital. No calls. No reports. Rourke swallowed. Then she's with him. Keaton nodded once. And that means the evidence didn't burn. His tone was measured, almost thoughtful. If he saved her, he'll protect her. Men like that don't do things halfway. Rourke shifted uneasily. He's dangerous. Keaton allowed himself a thin smile. So am I. Back in the cabin, the storm's breath found every crack. Ethan stacked supplies, water, fuel, medical kit, moving with purpose. Rowan watched, absorbing, her fear tempered by clarity. They won't expect resistance, she said. They shouldn't, Ethan replied. That's their mistake. Asher lifted his head, tail thumping once against the floor. The sound was faint but resolute. The mountain exhaled. Around them, heavy with secrets. And somewhere in that white silence, the path toward confrontation began to form. Night settled hard over the forest, the kind that erased distance and swallowed sound. Snowmobiles cut through the trees in a staggered line, their engines muffled, lights hooded. They moved with intent, not haste. At the front rode Gavin Holt, a broad-shouldered man with a broken nose set slightly to one side, his beard rimed with frost. He wore layered winter tactical gear, practical, unmarked, and carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to doing things quietly. Holt wasn't law enforcement, and he wasn't military, but he knew how to hunt people. The others followed his lead, 4 riders spread wide to avoid detection, rifles slung low, eyes fixed ahead. Deep in the woods, a single cabin breathed smoke into the storm. Inside, Ethan Vale stood at the center of the room, stripped down to efficiency. He handed Rowan Hale a compact flashlight and a short blade, the handle wrapped for grip. His expression was calm, voice level. "Forget balance, forget rules," he said. "If you're moving, you're alive. If you stop, you're done." Rowan's stance was careful, ribs still tender, but her eyes were sharp. She nodded once. There was no fear in her face now, only focus. She adjusted her grip, testing the weight of the blade. "Close quarters," Ethan continued. "Noise is a weapon. Darkness is a weapon. You don't win. You survive." He guided her through angles and cover, showed her how to use the narrow space of the cabin to break momentum, how to retreat without turning her back. His hands corrected her posture with brief, precise touches, not instruction for elegance, but for necessity. By the hearth, Asher rose unsteadily to his feet. The German shepherd's movements were stiff, pain etched into every step, yet his ears were forward, attention locked on the door. His chest rumbled with a low warning. The dog didn't understand plans or maps, but he understood threat. The first crack of a rifle shattered the night. Glass exploded inward, snow and splinters sprang across the floor. Ethan moved instantly, pulling Rowan down behind the heavy table as another shot punched through the wall where her head had been moments before. "Stay low," he said. The cabin shook as bullets chewed through timber. Holt's men advanced in a tightening arc, boots crunching softly in the snow. They fired in measured bursts, probing, patient. Ethan returned fire with surgical restraint. Single shots, controlled, forcing them to reposition. He shifted constantly, using shadows, using sound. Rowan tracked movement through gaps in the boards, relaying positions in short whispers. She kept her breathing steady, her mind anchored to function. A shape lunged at the door. Ethan kicked the latch, and the door flew inward. The man stumbled through, rifle raised. Ethan closed the distance and struck with brutal efficiency, redirecting the barrel, dropping him hard. Another figure appeared behind him. Rowan moved. She swept the flashlight beam low, blinding, and shoved the table just enough to break the angle. Ethan fired again. The second attacker went down with a shout, the sound swallowed by wind. Outside, Holt cursed and signaled his men to push. Asher surged forward. The dog burst through the doorway in a blur of muscle and will, slamming into a man who had stepped clear to take aim. The impact knocked both into the snow. A gun went off, a sharp crack that echoed through the trees. Rowan cried out. Asher yelped, a short, sharp sound, and rolled, blood blooming dark against the white. He scrambled up anyway, teeth bared, body placed squarely between Rowan and the muzzle tracking toward her. Ethan didn't hesitate. He slammed a switch mounted beneath the window frame. The generator coughed, then the cabin went dark again. But far away, beyond the trees, a small device awakened. A signal cut through the storm. The attackers hesitated. The pause cost them. From the valley a new sound rose. Deep, rhythmic, unmistakable. Rotors. Heavy ones. The snowmobile's engines faltered as heads turned skyward. Holt stared upward, jaw tight. "No," he muttered. "That's not possible." Searchlights split the night, white beams slicing through the forest canopy. A helicopter surged into view, then another, their silhouettes stark against the storm. Voices crackled over open frequencies. Clear, commanding. National Guard. Men in winter camouflage dropped into the clearing with practiced speed, weapons trained, perimeter snapping into place. The balance shifted in seconds. At the edge of the clearing, Miles Keaton stood rigid beside his idling vehicle, coat immaculate even here. His face was composed, lips pressed thin, eyes calculating as the lights washed over him. He had expected compliance, control. He had expected silence. He did not expect the sky to answer back. Ethan kept his position until the commands were unmistakable, until the threat dissolved into surrendering shapes and raised hands. Only then did he move to Asher's side, pressing cloth to the wound, steady and firm. The dog's tail thumped weakly once. Rowan knelt beside them, her hand on Asher's neck, voice low and certain. "You held," she whispered. Above them, the rotors thundered, snow lifting in shimmering spirals. The woods fell quiet. Morning arrived without drama. The storm loosened its grip, leaving the forest hushed beneath a pale sky. Snow lay unbroken except for the tracks already half-filled by drifting flakes. The mountain breathed again. At Snow Pine Regional Medical, sunlight filtered through tall windows and caught on white walls that smelled faintly of antiseptic and pine cleaner. Rowan Hale lay propped against pillows, a blanket tucked neatly at her shoulders. Color had returned to her face, and though bruises shadowed her jaw and ribs, her eyes were steady. She listened to the rhythmic beeping of a monitor and felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Relief. At her bedside sat Asher. The German shepherd's flank was wrapped in clean bandages, his posture careful but proud. His coat had been brushed and trimmed where needed, the sable fur catching the light. He lifted his head when Rowan shifted, pressed his muzzle against her hand, and stayed there, solid as an anchor. A nurse passing by paused to smile. "He hasn't left," she said. Lena Ortiz, early 30s, practical bun, warm eyes that had seen too many nights like this, adjusted Asher's IV line with gentle confidence. "Hero dogs don't take days off." Rowan smiled faintly. "Neither do good nurses." Down the corridor, Ethan Vale stood near a window, hands in the pockets of his jacket. He looked different now, less carved from tension, more grounded. The same clean lines remained, tall, athletic, dark hair cropped short, eyes sharp. But the weight behind his gaze had shifted. He watched snow slide from the eaves and felt something like quiet. Footsteps approached. Special Agent Marcus Hale. No relation? Stopped beside him. Marcus was mid-40s, lean with salt and pepper hair and a suit that fit like it had been tailored for travel rather than show. His handshake was firm, his demeanor precise. "The drive checks out," Marcus said. "Transactions, routes, video confirmations, it's comprehensive." Ethan nodded once. "We're convening a joint task briefing this afternoon," Marcus continued. "Federal, state, Guard. There's an open invitation for you. Strategic advisory role. Terrain, response planning, coordination." "I'm done with that," Ethan said gently. Marcus studied him. "You'd be good at it." "I know," Ethan replied. "That's not the same thing as wanting it." Marcus didn't push. He inclined his head, a professional accepting an answer. "The offer stands." In a secured room nearby, screens lit up with evidence, ledgers scrolling, time-stamped route maps, and video files that left little to interpretation. The USB drive lay on the table, small and unassuming, its contents now amplified by process and daylight. Each file told the same story. Money moving in patterns too careful to be random. Vehicles diverted with signatures that carried authority they did not deserve. Across town, in a courtroom paneled with dark wood, Miles. Keaton sat very still. He wore a suit that once projected assurance. Now it hung slightly looser, the lines at his mouth etched deeper. His hair was immaculate as ever, but his eyes had lost their shine. When the charges were read, conspiracy to commit murder, trafficking narcotics, trafficking weapons, abuse of office, the room felt heavy. The judge, Honor Evelyn Marsh, a woman in her late 50s with a composed, no-nonsense bearing, listened with measured attention. The verdict came without flourish. 25 years in federal custody, Judge Marsh said. No parole, no early release. Keaton did not look back. The men who had followed him, faces hardened by winters and poor choices, received sentences that matched their deeds. 10 years, 12, 15, 18. The numbers stacked like stones, undeniable. Back at the hospital, Rowan received visitors she hadn't expected. A small ceremony formed in the hallway, quiet and respectful. Captain Daniel Brooks, State Police, broad-shouldered and silver-haired, with a voice that carried authority without volume, stepped forward. "For courage and integrity," he said, pinning a commendation to Rowan's gown, "and for seeing what others refused to see." Her promotion followed soon after, a transfer to a special investigations unit, interagency by design. She accepted with a nod that held gratitude and resolve in equal measure. Asher received his own honor, a ribbon placed carefully at his collar. Cameras clicked. He accepted the attention with calm dignity, tail sweeping once against the floor. By late afternoon, Ethan returned to the cabin. The road was passable now, the trees no longer thrashing. Smoke curled from the chimney in a thin, steady line. Inside, the cabin felt changed. Not safer exactly, but settled. He set fresh wood by the hearth and poured water into the kettle. The quiet did not press, it welcomed. Footsteps crunched outside. Rowan appeared at the door, wrapped in a coat, Asher at her side. She looked stronger standing there, framed by white and sky. "You didn't leave?" she said. "No," Ethan replied. "I stayed." They stood together for a moment, watching snow drift in lazy arcs. Winter still held the mountain, but its edge had softened. The cold no longer felt like an enemy. Ethan rested his hands on the rail of the porch. For years, snow had been something to move through, to survive. Now it simply fell. Asher settled at Rowan's feet, head high, eyes half closed in contentment. The light lingered, and in that quiet, something like a beginning took shape. Sometimes life doesn't break us with one sudden blow. It wears us down quietly, through long winters, unanswered questions, and moments when doing the right thing feels dangerously lonely. This story reminds us that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a man who refuses to walk away again. Sometimes it's a woman who keeps the truth alive, even when the world turns against her. And sometimes it's a loyal dog who stands in front of danger without hesitation, simply because love tells him to. In our everyday lives, we all face our own storms, moments when staying silent would be easier, when running would hurt less than standing our ground. But real change, real hope, begins when one person decides to protect what matters, no matter the cost. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs a reminder that light can return, even in the coldest season. Leave a comment and tell us what this story meant to you. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of courage, loyalty, and second chances. Your voice matters. Your story matters. And sometimes, staying is the bravest choice of all.